Hey guys, it's me, Shane Davis, and I'm here today with another episode with the lovely Yanzi Lind.
Hello.
Thank you for joining me today. We're actually going to do a little bit of a recap of the year, and there's been some news lately, and I couldn't help but think let's draw a complete line on this decimated DC. It's a thing. It's a term we've been talking about on this channel, and people are like, "You're too pessimistic, Shane. That's not true. These books aren't being canceled. What are you talking about? Everything's fine." And we're going to put a little tinfoil hat on here. We're going to go through some real news, and we're going to talk about how it's all related. Now, if you guys can, please hit like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. It does help our channel out. Please sub to the channel also for more news. So let's get right down to it. Now, this story is this is a grim story, but we're going to take place. The beginning of Decimated DC really does begin with
Kevin Tsujihara.
Tsujihara. Okay, now he was gone because of a Me Too thing. That's said and done. But Kevin had been at Warner Brothers. What was he? A chief executive officer?
He was a chief executive of Warner Brothers and the chairman as well. So he held two titles.
Yeah. Right. And he even pushed himself up in this AT&T merger with a bit of a raise. Now, that's kind of important, kind of not. He had been with the company for 25 years. That's the important part. And with being with the company for 25 years, I had been told from top brass at DC Comics, I'd even seen this gentleman at a DC party in Burbank before, that he was, as you would say, a protector of DC Comics. He understood with Paul Levitz and other publishers just to let DC alone over there in New York, let them do their thing. And they would always have Superman t-shirts to sell. Let them make their comic books, and then we'll pull from it when we need to. And even at the end of the Harry Potter movies, Warner Brothers had even announced to their shareholders, everybody stay calm. We have these big box office movies ending that have been coming out every year. Don't worry, we have the DC superheroes to fill the shoes of Harry Potter. So they always understood, just let DC Comics be, and we'll always make money from it. Now, why this is important is once he was let go, top brass at DC had said they're a little nervous. Why were they nervous? New AT&T, Warner Brothers owners, all these things. The one guy that had been protecting DC Comics through Warner Brothers, even with them moving from New York to Burbank, they were still left alone to do their comics for the most part. So all of a sudden, now everybody's worried. This guy that saw the importance of developing this material on its own terms with its own fandom, and then, take what you want from it like a buffet, he's not there anymore. So what happens next is shortly after, I wouldn't say shortly after, but, a bit after, Dan Didio is let go. Now there's some time here, of course, but Dan wasn't really probably long at DC after that. There's mixed reports, but all of it has to do with 5G, and that's where everything gets muddy. There obviously was an event. It was approved. They were going to do more comics, and actually, DC Comics was doing probably the most they had as a publisher with things like being everywhere they could be, meaning for the first time in years, they'd been doing outreach through like Walmart. They were, again, pushing in with the direct market. They were doing things like Black Label, again, through the direct market, but that was kind of, geared towards more of an adult audience. On top of that, they were investing in YA. Now, granted, that was probably not a great decision, but the point is as a publisher, for one of the first times in my lifetime, DC was trying to fire on all cylinders everywhere. They were scrambling, and so to speak. Now, all of that does seem to be for nothing. You ended up with bad things like, in hindsight, you end up with bad things like Batman Swing, I'm Not Starfire, YA books that just, like Gotham High, things that are laughable. So there were some bad decisions made in all of this. and everybody kind of gets hung up on the 5G. Now, Dan leaving was before COVID hit, so those are unrelated. So then COVID hits, and this happened. And a lot of this is getting to where we're at today in comics. So now we don't have a protector. Now the guy that was kind of leading DC Comics in the structuring of the continuity and the books they were putting out, who Dan had a big value and a solid, you can't just sell Batman books. You have to sell your B-level characters, your C-level characters. Dan was really about a DC universe. He had wanted some characters like John Constantine and Swamp Thing to come over into the DC universe. And then, again, he kind of gutted them from Vertigo. So there was a big interest in this type of DC universe that Dan really had an idea of. Now, COVID hits. Steve Geppi announces Diamond has ceased distribution of weekly product. Now, this kind of starts a domino effect. That kind of goes, some would say, sped up the inevitable. That meaning that eventually the timetables changed. Of course, the comics were going to grind down to nothing, or the big companies would outsource them or not care about the comics. And everybody's going to say, well, COVID just sped everything up. I would say COVID kind of changed everything in the distribution model of comics, and we're still figuring that out. So with Steve Geppi shutting down, a lot of publishers like Boom, Dynamite, IDW, Marvel, Dark Horse, except for DC, stopped printing books, and a lot of printers were shut down, which actually DC's printer was shut down in the middle of my run on Metalman, and they actually had to go find a new printer. Why did they go find a new printer, though? DC went to go find a new printer because DC Comics was going to do different distribution. While everybody else was sitting on the couch during COVID and could not put books out, DC Comics was already had a fail-safe plan. Now, this fail-safe plan had been there for years. And when I had heard from a DC insider that was pretty high up the food chain, the question wasn't that they had other distributors in mind. The question is why now were they doing it? And that question's always bugged me because, I don't get why they did it now when they could have done it, say, back in New 52 or something. And again, no surprise to this, the two distributors were two of the biggest comic chains, one being Midtown and one being a mail order subscriber. So those two distributors or comic shops, whatever you want to call them, actually had an incentive to keep the trains moving so they could keep selling books month in, month out, whether it was through the mail. A lot of it was mail order, especially Midtown Comics. So, they had every reason to get the spice must flow, so to speak. So that's going to lead us now. Now, this is the question before we get to the DC bloodbath. The question is why did DC move mountains to put books out when Marvel, DC, Boom, Dark Horse, and people sat back? Did they care about the retailers? Some people are going to say the answer is no, because they actually closed down Facebook groups and so on. Any type of communication lines with retailers they had shut down. The truth is, people at DC, especially the people that were victims of these bloodbaths, were actually pushing the books out because they had to produce. They were being evaluated. DC Comics, and that's the thing that gets lost in all of this, is DC Comics was being evaluated on a quarterly basis. DC accounting had been shutting down every 3 months because they were looking through all the numbers on everything, on what it cost to make a book, on what the profits of a book was. And when you start looking at a comic book on a month-to-month basis and say, well, let's go back 10 years ago. Let's say if I looked at Geoff Johns on JSA and we had the popular Stargirl show. If the same account went back 10 years ago and he was looking on a quarterly basis, evaluating that team or Geoff Johns being on JSA and the things he was doing with Stargirl and investing in these characters that they don't put on lunchboxes and T-shirts, that probably that same accountant would have pulled him off that book or shut that book down. But today they get to reap the rewards, which again Kevin would have known. They get to reap the rewards of a TV show, a Stargirl TV show that people seem to like, and it's going on HBO Max on the 2nd. So there's this weird this becomes a weird complicated system of transmedia and entertainment company versus a tech company that like AT&T that had came in and bought them, or a telecoms company who came in and bought them and don't understand developing entertainment. So here we are today in the DC layoffs, or not today, yesterday, DC layoffs, the first bloodbath. Now, the people that are getting laid off here that you don't really read about are the same people that were pushing these books out. The desperate move to save their own jobs, to look like they're of some service and they can make book. I hate to say, did those people think they were going to show that comic books were COVID proof? And was that some type of idea that they would impress somebody up at Warner Brothers as theaters are shutting down and productions are shutting down, that somehow comic books could still be made? And there's a valid point there. But it was too little too late. And the first bloodbath happened. And, some restructuring happened. Some announcements happened. Future State was announced. And Future State was picking up the 5G stuff that goes back to Dan Didio's plans with refurbishing the DC brand for their new owners, AT&T. But there, shortly after Future State was mentioned, there was a DC Comics bloodbath too. So Jim Lee had, during fandom mentioned or around it, said that 25% of the DC line, this is an important number, 25% of the DC line doesn't make money. Historically, in my career in comics and working at DC Comics for 20 some years, I've always heard 25% of DC's line doesn't make money. That's been there for 20 years. 25 years, Kevin didn't care if 25% of the line made money or not. It was important to Stargirl would have been one of those books that didn't make money. JSA would have been one of those books that, would have fit into that speech. That was 1/4 of the line that didn't make money, was probably JSA, especially when you add up what the creative cost was of it. So you have to understand the creative cost and what the book sells that dictates a profit. So Geoff Johns probably made that book unprofitable in a way, because he's a superstar writer and he deserved top pay, and he gave top material, and that top material again turned into a TV show for them. So now that's kind of the long tail of a business investment, especially in comic books and transmedia and so on. So then that's going to take us to DC Comics today in March, and this is after Future State. DC Comics to reduce its publishing output in March, but it didn't reduce its publishing output in March. It actually, the month prior, it had the few months before. So this is the important takeaway here, and there's a lot of decisions that were made that led us to this, and really after Kevin was removed and the protector of DC Comics was removed, here came in Hollywood accountants and bean counters saying this doesn't make any sense, shrink the line to our core. And by the way, we're cutting rates. Comic people shouldn't make that much money. These things don't make any money, which is a recipe for disaster, because a lot of these books actually have went up in price because they have a backup story. So a lot of the books in the shrunken line now are actually $1 more, but they don't have a lot of talent behind them. So your Snyders, your Geoff Johns, your Greg Capullos, people like that, they're not involved in these books. So is there a big demand for these books, or are they just resting on the actual character Superman alone, and it doesn't matter who's working on it? What are you going to get in that? So, but this is the takeaway here. By the end of December, DC will have published 50 one-shots, miniseries, or ongoing titles. Okay, so we had 50 books they were putting out, but then in February, during Future State, that number drops down to 40. So Future State's weird. Future State, they cut off 10 books off the bat, but it's very confusing. Nobody can really take note that the line's shrinking just yet. Why? Because they want retailers to keep ordering, and they actually double ship these books for this event, Future State. Now, here's the trick that this future state is a complete smokescreen that people don't catch on yet, especially the retailers that are still ordering 3 months ahead. That actually AT&T and Warner Brothers may be divesting themselves from you as a retailer and even the general comic audience. They're pulling back from us. They actually don't want to be on the hook. They're actually taking baby steps backwards. So, moving forward, both these counts include several double shipping titles. We talked about. However, in March, DC is publishing just 34 single issues, and that's not even double shipping. So we basically went from 50 issues down to 40 double shipping issues, which is a blitz, and a cash grab for 2 months on a weird mini event that sometimes is said it's not in continuity, and then DC Comics walks it back and says it is very important and it's returnable, but you have to order a minimum amount to even get an account with DC Comics. So there's a minimum order cutoff that you have to get before they'll even ship your books on Future from this moment forward, from Future's end, or I'm sorry, Future State. And here we are today, and they pulled back. They took another step backward, and we're down to 34 single issues. That's 34 titles. Now that's kind of close to 1/3 of the line cut. But wait, Jim Lee had said only 25% of the line wasn't making money. So why are we instead of losing 1/4? Why are we closer to 1/3? And the real answer here, guys, and you can kind of see a string of events here, is they are pulling out of the comic business. And I fear that we're actually going to see more of a smaller line. And I'm not even sure if this is about profits. I do think profits are important, and I think they think profits are important. That's why they're shrinking the line, but now charging an extra dollar for a lot of core titles. A lot of those core titles are Action Comics, Superman, Batman, Detective, Justice League, Wonder Woman, and the new Joker book. All those books have a backup story, maybe a Jimmy Olsen backup story, and you have to pay an extra dollar for that. So obviously shrinking, they want to shrink the line but still make the same money if they can, or more money. So and spend less on talent at the same time. I could go through a list of creators, but there's a lot of DC talent reportedly saying their contracts are up at DC and they have to move on to other things. DC's not renewing their contract. Doesn't matter if they came off of Batman. Doesn't matter if they made a lot of money on a big event. They're moving on and forward, and there's only a few big names that are even doing certain books. And if you look at those certain books they're doing, they're more like one-shots. So even if they're getting their prestige rate, they're doing it for one shot, not for a series, not for a monthly book. So they're really not investing in talent to sell a line anymore. And that's kind of alarming, especially if you're a comic book shop. With the distributor model, Yanzi, you've talked to certain retailers. It seems like that's kind of been a big disruption for them.
Yeah, so actually, I would like to provide a bit of a retailer's overview to this whole fiasco so far about decimated DC. So we know that actually because of the comic superhero movie boom, that there have been more interest in all this superhero pop culture stuff. And we have actually known some retailers who expanded their businesses, opened up more stores and so on, increased their online sales and all that stuff. And what happened, especially after with the shift to multiple distributors, is that suddenly these distributors find that they have to order DC books separately from the DC distributors and everything else from Diamond. And that's a bit of a mess for them because now not only do they have to put in 2 different order sheets each week, not each week, but whenever FOC happens, they also have to pay for 2 different shipping fees because one is from the DC distributor and one is from Diamond. And not to mention, there were a lot of teething pains because they were complaining about shipments coming in damaged, shipments not arriving at all this stuff. And finally, just when it looked like the distributors had their act together, what happened is that they're like, whoops, we're shutting one of them down. And all of you guys with this guy, go to this guy instead. And oh, by the way, now you must order a minimum of $500 every single month of DC titles. Otherwise, we won't ship anything to you until you accumulate $500 worth of order. So it has been a major disruption for the comic retailers at this point in time. And I hate to say, it doesn't look like it's going to get any better because we have looked at the much solicits. Maybe a few big name writers, maybe 1 or 2 big name artists, But you see, DC traditionally, every time they want to do an event book or when they want to, come out on an event book and start doing new number ones and so on, they will bring on their A game writers and artists. And we're just not seeing that in the much solicits. So if the distributors are counting on a big, boost from DC after Future State, which by the way, we are hearing from a lot of retailers that they have customers telling them, okay, you know what, cancel me for February and March. I'm not pulling anything for February and March. I just want to continue
Right.
after that. And I just don't know if they can continue from that too, because the creative teams are not there anymore. The enticement for the readers to come back is not really there anymore. So, I mean, we really feel very bad for our retailer friends, but this is something that it looks like it's just going to keep going down this road.
Yeah. This is going to be choppy waters for people ordering this material, because without a push, you're really just selling the idea of Superman. And again, there's no Aquaman book. This is the first time in 10 years that we haven't had an Aquaman monthly title. So even the characters they are putting out, it really is going to be the core characters that they feel that they can merchandise. I mean, Aquaman merchandise is not the easiest thing to push. Of course, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman and Justice League are the things they can push. And oddly enough, there is a Joker book, and you can buy tons of Joker merchandise when it goes hand in hand with Batman merchandise. So obviously, this does look like a line of comics, a comic line that is geared towards the transmedia side of things. And also,
For that,
with the
may I point out
solicitation,
Swamp Thing?
Swamp Thing, yeah.
Yeah, can you imagine saying Swamp Thing merch?
A little hard, but they are keep trying to do Swamp Thing with their TV shows. So that is that. There is a silver lining here, guys. Comics are still being manufactured, so let's hope for the best and hope we get more good comics than bad comics with the new direction of DC Comics. One thing I kind of can't fit into this whole narrative, though, he's very elusive in this, is the new head honcho Daniel Cherry, the guy that was brought in for esports. I do not see him in this narrative, and that's actually the very alarming thing, because I'm pretty sure a lot of this is to do with him. Some of it, some of these decisions and shrinking the line, but I also see him trying to stay out of this at the same time. And a lot of people that make that have bad news really don't want their name out there in it. It's kind of weird that there's not somebody giving an announcement that this is a corporate decision. I found it strange that it came from Jim Lee, that he admitted that 25% of the line doesn't make money, which has always been that case at DC Comics. Again, Stargirl's a good example. Batwoman's a good example. Maybe those books really didn't make money, but they did turn into TV shows and other things for DC Comics. And that was that again, going back to Kevin, he understood that. And that's how come they have this rich library of stuff to pull from. So I guess the question is, guys, is Decimated DC the new normal? Has AT&T said we have enough of a library? We don't need to develop anymore. We can just pull from this from here until whenever. What's your thoughts? Leave us a comment, give us a like, hit subscribe, and we will catch you again next time with another video. Goodbye.